Before we get into today's episode, I just want to give you a little note about the sound. As I'm recording this, we are currently mid-move and we're at our parents' for a week or so. And I'm just not in my normal recording location or in my future recording location yet. So if the audio sounds a bit different to you, a little echoey, that's why. But hang with me. The change in audio quality this week will hopefully be remedied by next week. And also, it is worth enduring for the content in today's episode because y'all, I am so excited to share today's guest with you. So earlier this year, I reached out to my email list and I was looking for AP science teachers to interview on the podcast. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I was so overwhelmed by how many great applicants there were. And it basically was impossible to narrow down, but I had only created space in my podcast planning for one guest per AP science discipline. So there were a few applicants like Kimberly Leary, who you get to meet today, who I just was like, I still want them on this podcast and they have a really unique perspective I want to share. And so that is what I've created space for this summer. And I'm so excited to introduce y'all to Kimberly today. Kimberly teaches within the science department at Devon Preparatory School outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She has taught AP Environmental Science, Agricultural Science, and Oceanography at the high school level and Chemical and Earth Science and Interactive Life Science for 8th and 6th grade. She graduated from Ursinus College with a BA in Environmental Studies in Spanish, and she received a Master's of Education from St. Joseph's University. At Devon, she serves as the Manager of Sustainability Programs and moderates the Environmental Protection Club. She is passionate about environmentalism, sustainability, and supporting her students' passions through hands-on, interactive, and student-centered learning. So Kimberly is just this APES teacher that I wanted to talk to you. And yes, we do talk a lot about APES, but y'all, all of her APES wisdom is so great for any AP teacher. But like in addition to just talking about AP science, she shares so much. She shares her experience prepping for her first maternity leave as an AP teacher. She talks about how it went when she came back from leave, and then also how she's managed to achieve work-life balance this past school year as a new mom and an AP teacher, which I know is something it's so hard for all teachers to have work-life balance, but especially as you're adjusting to being a parent for the first time, and especially with that AP extra workload. So on top of that, Kimberly has great hacks for grading. And honestly, I think what I loved most about our conversation is just her mindset. She has such a great mindset around managing student apathy. And then also she shares such good advice at the end of our conversation for new AP environmental science teachers, but also for teachers who might be listening to this right now, knowing that you're going into a school year where you're going to have your first long-term maternity or paternity leave ever. And yeah, it's just such good wisdom and I cannot wait for you to hear it. So I'm going to stop gabbing, and without further ado, here is my conversation with AP Environmental Science teacher and new mom, Kimberly Leary. This is Secondary Science Simplified, a podcast for secondary science teachers who want to engage their students and simplify their lives. I'm Rebecca Joyner from It's Not Rocket Science. As a high school science teacher turned curriculum writer, I am passionate about helping other science teachers love their jobs, serve their students, and do it all in only 40 hours a week. Are you ready to rock the time you spend in your classroom and actually have a life outside of it? You are in the right place, teacher friend. Let's get to today's episode. Hi, Kimberly. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm great. And I'm so excited to have time to have this conversation with you. I got connected with you back when I reached out for AP teachers to come on the podcast. And I was so impressed by your application because you mentioned specifically feeling like work-life balance is something you had really figured out. And so I was like, we got to have her on to talk about this.
Happy to be on.
Well, and I feel like especially for AP teachers, it just feels like such an extra workload. And so I'm just super excited to talk to you about this. So just some context for our listeners, you've been teaching AP Environmental for 6 years. So something I asked all the AP teachers who have come on is just first and foremost, how do you cover it all? You know, because I think that is like one of the biggest struggles for AP teachers.
Yeah, I think the pacing for sure is the biggest challenge. I'm fortunate that I teach at a school where it's a small private Catholic school, all boys. The kids are paying a pretty high tuition to come there. So there's a high amount of buy-in in general for our APs. So that really helps. But for me, sticking to the CED, sticking to the pacing guide, it didn't come naturally at first. I started teaching when we had, before the course redesign, and then 2 years into it, got the course redesign. And that really helped kind of tailor the way that I taught the course. I have a giant poster of the CED, like many AP teachers, laminated. It's up on a front board in the room. And I write down every date for all of their unit exams, 1 through 9, on the first day of school.
Wow.
So they know my Unit 9 exam is April 15th or whatever it is for that year. And I go through and I look at my pacing guide from the year before. I keep really detailed notes of, okay, Unit 5 took me a little bit longer than normal. I had to push that till after Christmas or whatever it may be. And the students, I hold them accountable to that. I show them, we're on the train tracks. We're on the train. I will get you to the destination if you hang in there. If you hang on with me, I will get you there and I will get you fully equipped. So sticking to the CED, I have my unit exams literally laid out from the first day of school. That really, really helps. If we start to kind of fall behind, I'll assign additional resources over Easter break or Christmas break. I really try not to, and I really try to honor their breaks, but there are times when I'll give them a couple of weeks. Okay, we didn't have time to get through this lecture. I'm going to record it. It's going to be an ed puzzle. Watch it in the next 2 weeks. You'll be good to go for the unit exam. So that's one of the biggest ways, is really just setting the pace from the beginning and not allowing myself to deviate from that.
I love that you just go ahead and choose the dates. And I think that's great motivation for them too, to be like, listen, I'm not planning on assigning you any work over breaks, but if we get derailed, like that's what's going to happen, Also, I did not know you were at an all boys school.
Yes. Very unique experience.
Has that been your whole teaching career, or has that just been recently?
My first 2 years, I taught sixth grade, and that was at a charter school in Florida. So very vastly different experience. I'm outside of Philadelphia now. And the boys that I teach, it's an all Catholic boys school. So that's been my experience, my only high school experience. And it's been my experience for the last 6 years. It's interesting, but I really like it. The boys, I feel like I can have a different, drier sense of humor. They don't take as much offense as when I taught girls. Just for some reason.
And middle school girls especially. Like I can't imagine, bless them.
Yeah. So that experience has been really unique and very distinct. So there's a couple of units too where I have a little bit, when we're talking about populations and we're talking about fertility and things like that, it's a different vibe in the classroom with all boys.
Totally. That's so funny. I can't imagine just what that would be like. That's so unique. Okay. One of the things you had mentioned when we had originally connected was talking about your maternity leave. And so when did your maternity leave fall in terms of your AP schedule, and kind of how did you handle that?
Yeah. So I just had my first baby in July. He'll be a year, July 7th. So he's about 11 months now. I went into the school year, December. I think I told my administration, okay, I'm pregnant. I'm due in July. Like a lot of schools in the area, my school is kind of transitioning to maternity leave is 8 weeks when you have the baby, which is problematic when you're used to, I get my summers off. I'm still getting paid over the summer. So I was grandfathered in where I got to take my 8 weeks at the beginning of the school year, but anybody after me will take their 8 weeks when they have the baby. So I would have almost had to go back at the start of school if that had been the case. Luckily, that wasn't the case. And I took my maternity leave. I think our in-service started mid to late August. So I was back in school October 15th.
Okay.
So I missed like the first quarter. We do 4 quarters at our school. So I kind of came in at a little bit of an awkward time, but right before Thanksgiving, right before Christmas. So I came at an okay time to kind of hit the ground running. I was really fortunate that I guess it was not great because they couldn't find a substitute teacher. There were not very many long-term subs that wanted an 8-week gig. That's really hard, especially when we can't find subs in general. But to say,
yes,
end date is October, no one wants that. So for my other courses, I teach middle school sciences as well. They used people in the building and they got paid an extra stipend. Luckily, I'm type A, and all of my maternity plans, every single minute of every day was written out. Here's the link to the Google Slides. Here's the link to the Google Doc of the guided notes you need to print for the students. I think you'll get through 15 slides. Here's the homework. I did all of it for them. So the people that took on my middle school classes were happy to do it. It was not a big deal for them because it was just, they showed up and, taught rocks and minerals, whatever. My AP course, obviously way more challenging. There was no one in the building that really had the subject knowledge. We have a lot of great biology, physics, and chemistry teachers, but the crossover to earth science is not usually as feasible for those scientists. I mean, they could handle it, but they didn't really want to. So they actually reached out to, when I started at my school, there was an amazing teacher, Roger McCouch, who had been teaching it for years and years and years. He turned 70 the year that I was hired, and he said, good, I can retire. She can take all of my courses. This is perfect. So they called him. Oh. And he came in and covered the first 8 weeks of AP for me. And again, I had a Google sheet with, you need to get through the first 3 units while I'm gone. Here are the unit tests, do not deviate. And he was amazing. He did a great job getting them through. Because that's a huge worry when you're on maternity leave, is who's, especially at the beginning of the year, who's going to set up my classes? Who's going to lay the foundation and set them up for success? Again, I was really fortunate that he did that for me.
I cannot relate more. When I went on mine, mine was actually for the last quarter of the year. And so mine was similar in that there were a couple of teachers who covered some, then they brought in a couple subs just to do some of my lower level. But then for my AP course, the previous AP bio teacher was now like the curriculum dean at our school. And so he just came in and taught, but it was actually perfect because he taught until the redesign. So he wasn't as familiar with that, but he at least could come in, he could finish up what we hadn't, and then he could get them reviewed. I was like, you just got to get them ready. But it is so hard to find subs, let alone science subs, let alone ones that don't want to do AP. It's impossible.
It's so hard. And the ones that they found, we had long-term subs for physics. Our AP physics teacher was sick and had to leave. We had 4 different people because they weren't competent, or they weren't able to, or their schedule, or this or that, or one got a job somewhere else. So
that's so chaotic. Yeah. I luckily had the same people the whole time, but I had 4 different people doing the different classes. And some of them were not science, but at least I was so type A like you, and, micromanaged them so badly.
My middle school course, I teach 8th grade chemical and earth science. I had 2 different people teaching each section, and one class average was a 71. The other class average was 101.
Oh my word.
And okay. We're given the same instructions. You were given the same materials. I don't know how.
You're this doesn't track. Okay. So that's a good, that leads to my next question. So when you came back, kind of how was that transition? First, let's talk about just for your students. How did you kind of jump in and kind of regroup and balance out something like that where you're this isn't right?
I did my first day of school activity with them the day that I got back. We had a really chill day. I always have Google Slides kind of introducing myself and who I am. I talked about the baby, showed pictures of my son and things like that, and kind of wanted to meet them where they're at. At the beginning of the year, I do an activity where I ask them, what do you need from me as your teacher? How do you learn best? What activities do you think really help you? What kind of teacher do you work well with? Do you tell me about teachers you've had in the past that really motivated you or whatever? What are things teachers do that you really don't like and doesn't work for you? So I always do that activity at the beginning of the year to kind of lay the foundation of what kind of scaffolding, what kind of differentiation can I do for the kids in this room? So I did that when I came back and kind of let them know I'm a mom now. I've got different priorities. And I've also been at my school long enough that it's a small school. There's in the middle school, in the 8th grade, we only have 36 kids. In my high school courses, each grade is only about 40 or 50 kids. So they know me, even if I haven't taught them yet. They know who I am. They know, they've heard about me. So they know what I'm about. So I go in kind of with that expectation of my priorities have shifted. I've taught this course many, many times. I'm pretty comfortable with what I'm teaching. And in my AP course, I even show them my scores from last year. I'll show them my scores from every year and tell them, I had a really high average last year. That's not because I'm phenomenal at what I do. It's because I'm good at telling you what you need to do well. And I always phrase it like that. And I have a student survey I send out at the end of the year that I made for all my students. What activities did you hate? What helped you? What activities were the worst, but you realize, wow, they really did help me. I should continue doing them. And I'll put comments that students wrote in that survey from last year on that Google slide to kind of get buy-in from my students as well, to show them, look, people complained about my course or said it was really hard or had a lot of work. But at the end of the year, after they took the AP exam, these are the comments they were saying. Things like, your classroom exams were way harder than the AP exam. The labs were so long and sometimes boring, but man, they prepared me well, or things like that. Whatever, students are brutally honest. So I did that when I came back and kind of showed them, if you follow my plan, things will go well for you, hopefully, at the end. Because again, all of our students are so focused on getting those 4s and 5s, getting the college credit. They're really motivated to do well on the exam. So I did that on the first day, and kind of just the first couple of days just kind of eased them back into it. They had my middle school courses had a bunch of different teachers. Some teachers they really didn't like, and it didn't go well, and this and that. And they had math teachers teaching them. So they didn't do any of the labs that I had designed because the math teacher wasn't capable of doing it, which is totally valid.
Understandable. Yeah.
So my first week with my middle schoolers, we did a lot of lab safety, and we did the measurement lab where you have the water and the graduated cylinder. So I did more skills and things like that. Whereas AP, I gave them a couple of days to kind of get used to me. I talked about the pacing for the year, and then we jumped right back in. They had just taken a unit exam for me, so it was a good time to kind of jump back in and start with a new unit. But overall, it was an okay transition. The students were fortunate that they liked me a lot. I was worried about that, like, oh, what if they love their sub more than me, and then I come back in, and the transition was pretty good in that regard.
That's awesome. Okay, so then what did it look like on the other side of it? That's like your teacher perspective, but as a new mom coming back in, how did that kind of change your perspective on how you do your job, and just kind of, did you start doing the job differently after becoming a parent?
For sure. I think every new parent will answer the same way. Your priorities change. I had, again, my 8th graders, I taught them when they were in 6th grade. And there was one particular student who said, you used to grade things a lot faster. And I laughed, and I was like, yeah, I didn't feel like grading your test this weekend. It was nice out. I was outside. So for me, I was really high stress sometimes about getting things graded, and they need the feedback. And having a baby, just kind of, you let go of a lot of that. You realize, I'll grade it eventually. They'll get the feedback that they need. The students that care are going to come seek me out anyway, and I'm going to give them the feedback, whatever. The kids that didn't care still don't care. So I definitely graded things a lot more slowly than I was used to. I graded a lot less this school year. And I kind of just learned I just had more grace with myself about things too. I would remember, oh man, this lab didn't go well last year. I was supposed to change it. Well, I didn't have time. We're doing it the same way. So I really gave myself a lot of grace with that. And I just am never on time now. I used to be a very on time person, but I was, breastfeeding and still on that nursing journey. So feeding my son before school, and then immediately getting in the car, running to school, pumping throughout the day, running home I missed meetings. I missed this and that. I couldn't meet kids after school, but it was really healthy for me and necessary for me to set those boundaries and realize that at the end of the day, my job, I'm so passionate about it. I love my career, but my son is always going to be more important than that. And I think it was healthy for the students to see that too, that no, I'm not here after school. You can find me during my lunch. I'll chat with you while I'm eating, but I'm not going to, I think I was giving too much. I think a lot of teachers do that in the beginning of their career. A lot of us get burnt out because we're coming in early, we're staying late, and we're doing it for the kids. But you kind of have to shift to, your family.
I think that is I love what you said about it's good for the students to see us having boundaries and showing I work to live. I don't live to work. And now I have other things going on, just like I know you have other things going on. I want to ask too, you said you started grading less. How did that impact your students? Because I think one of the things I'm constantly telling teachers is I guarantee you're grading more than you need to. And I think that's but we, like you said, we have this compulsion to be A+ effort on everything, even us. And it's fine if you don't grade all the things.
Yeah. For AP, the biggest shift that I have my students, I have them read the textbook. I always say read because I know they're not actually reading it, but I tell them you have to interact with it in some way. So I have these note pages where it has the vocab word, write in the definition, read the case study at the beginning, summarize it in your own words, tell me what you learned from it. How does it relate to what we've been talking about in class? So it's maybe a 4 or 5 page document, and they're typically reading about 10 pages in their book. Again, I know they're not reading. They're skimming, they're hunting and pecking and finding the vocab word and writing it. But they're opening up their book and they have to look at it. And they know they usually have that assigned to them about 2 or 3 times a week. And then I'll tell them every single time we use Schoology. That's our Canvas
learning management system. Yeah.
So that's our platform, and it'll be assigned on there. And every single time it's posted, it'll say, be prepared for a possible reading quiz in class.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably only utilize it maybe once a week,
Mm-hmm.
but every single day that they have a notes page due, they know there's a possibility they're getting quizzed on it. And it's not something I prepare ahead of time. I have note cards or I have scrap paper on my desk. They walk in and I say, clear your desks. And they know, oh no, it's a quiz day. I read it 2 days ago, whatever. I write 2 questions on the board. I just open up the textbook where they were supposed to read and I find a question in that moment, write it on the board. It's worth 2 points. That's it.
I love that.
Really helped. And then I grade it in the moment. They give it back to me and I tell them, I'm like, do you want to know? And they're like, yeah, 1 out of 2. Oh, I knew I got. So I do it right away. And then I type it in my grade book before they walk out the door at the end of the period. That has saved me so much time. I still grade the notes pages.
Yeah.
I just put a grade in. I don't.
Yeah, they're
I don't
more for completion. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't look at it. It's all digital. It's a digital submission, so I don't have any papers going around. So I'll do that. That saves a lot of time. And then the biggest grading hack that I started a couple years ago that I've really implemented this year is I do a 2-day exam for AP Environmental Science. On the first day, our periods are about 42, 45 minutes. On the first day, I'll give them multiple choice. In the beginning of the year, I give them 35 multiple choice questions. Later on in the year, I up it to 40 to give them a little bit faster pacing, faster than the AP exam, but still they're used to it at that point. So day 1 is multiple choice, usually about 35 or 40. Day 2 is 2 FRQs. FRQs, there's no way I can give them the feedback I want to give them in to grade things within 2 weeks. There's just no way I'm going to do that. I'm not going to prioritize it. I don't want to. It's time consuming. It's terrible. So I started I would take the College Board rubric for the question. I put it in a really nice format. I literally type it up because I think College Board can be so funky with their format.
Yes.
Graphics everywhere. So I type it up and then I tell them how many points it's worth. I give everybody in the room that packet, the rubric. I give them all highlighters. We peer grade and they highlight where they got the points from. Okay, he got 2 points here because he answered this or that. And then they do it for each other's sections. So everybody grades 2 exams. And then I'm the third person that's grading it. And I average out all 3 of our scores. So if he gave you a 17 out of 20 and he gave you a 16 out of 20, but I felt like you deserved an 18 or whatever, I average that. I've never had a single student complain since I implemented this because they know 3 people saw this, 3 different people. And it gives them great feedback in real time because then they're asking questions. Oh, wait, if I said this, would I have gotten credit? And we can have that conversation right away. And I usually do it the day after they finish taking the exam. So it's super fresh in their minds. We can go over it in real time and it saves me hours of grading. And it's better for them. It really is good for them to see the rubric and to see where the point's coming from. That is the biggest hack that I will tell every AP teacher. You have to do this.
I think them seeing the rubrics is such a game changer, like you said. And then that level of evaluation is pretty high on Bloom's taxonomy. It's a good thing for them to do with their brains to apply it. And like you said, it saves you so much time because then when you're doing your look through, I bet you're just be able to do it so much quicker.
Okay.
I love that.
I'm looking, okay, where did they get points off? And then I don't have to read all of their words because it's just not feasible. Especially I teach less AP students. I have 2 sections, usually about 20, 25. And I know teachers that, have 100 or 200.
Right.
There's no way. There's no way.
They've got to hack that for sure. You said this will be 2 points or that's 20 points. How do you set up your grade book? This is a rogue question, but I feel like people ask this a lot and I'm always curious. Are you doing points? Are you doing percentages, categories? What do you got going on?
Total points.
Okay.
So we have homeworks are really not worth a whole lot, usually 2 or 4 points. We'll do maybe a couple projects throughout the year. We do more projects after the AP exam when we have more time. I'll do ed puzzle videos. So mostly myself lecturing, or I'll use Bozeman, or I can't think of the other one, Crash Course. I'll use those. That'll just go more in depth. I'll grade those usually anywhere from 2 to 5 points, depending. Personal progress checks, I don't grade, but I do assign a lot of those. I'll do practice tests on AP Classroom. Those will be a couple points. I don't have a ton of points for overall assignments. Yeah. So I try to balance it. Labs will usually be worth about 10, 15 points, depending on the lab. And then I'll do case studies, which I think I spoke about on my application. It's something that I think AP teachers, especially in environmental science, where it's such an interdisciplinary course, I'll do case studies for every unit. I work in an area outside of Philadelphia that's extremely wealthy. So my students and my students are paying about 30 grand to come here. So it's most of them are pretty privileged and typically live in a bubble. So I like to do case studies. We'll do a case study on food deserts. Well, I'll assign a different neighborhood in Philadelphia, and they'll have to look at how many grocery stores, how far would you have to walk, how many buses would you have to take to get to fresh produce if you live in northern Philadelphia versus central Philadelphia, where, you've got a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's on every corner. So we'll do that in one unit. I'll do urban heat island case study where we'll look at Atlanta versus, Philadelphia or any other city. We'll do case studies. I studied abroad when I was in college in Ecuador. So I'll do one on oil in the Amazon and indigenous rights. Who owns this land? Who gets to decide? So we'll do case studies like that I do personally, because it reinforces the concepts that we're talking about. It gives them real world examples. And my students, just especially my guys, they just need to be exposed to diversity. They need to be. We do, the urban heat island case study where we talk about why is it so much hotter in this neighborhood in Philadelphia versus this one. And it's because of the trees and impervious surfaces and things like that. And every year I get a student ask me, why don't they just plant a tree? And I don't live in Philadelphia. My husband and I moved out. But when I lived in Philly, I would always say to them, have you ever met anyone that loves trees more than me? And they're all like, no, you love trees. And I'm like, I can't go out and plant a tree. I live in an apartment complex. This is all of the paperwork I would have to go through. So it's good for them to also learn these real life examples of people that are dealing with environmental degradation because of the neighborhood that they live in. They're dealing with asthma and things like that. So all these case studies, I think really, really help with that. So those are usually worth about 10 points along with labs. And then my exams, my multiple choice, each question is worth 2 points. So the multiple choice section is worth 80 points. And then the FRQs are each scored out of 10. So it'll be 20.
Okay.
I'm still trying to find a way to tweak it so it matches the AP.
Right.
Where it's 60-40, but I haven't figured it out yet. So if someone listening to this has a hack that they can share with me, that would be great.
Yeah. I don't know if you could do one. I don't know if 1.5 points for the multiple choice would make a difference, like help it a little skew, but
yeah, I need to try that.
Okay. I love that. I'm obsessed with those case study ideas. So are you writing all of those yourself, or do you have a place you like to get them from?
I haven't found one that I like. There's a couple of resources. There was an old one. I forget the name of the website. It's been discontinued, so you can't even access it anymore.
The Buffalo case studies.
Yeah, I write the urban heat island. I do one on the nuclear disasters as well. I do one on California sea otters. All of these I sell on Teachers Pay Teachers.
Oh,
that's
good.
like my number one sellers.
Okay, we're going to link all this. I literally was about to be like, if you don't sell these, you should. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, those are truly the only things that are like entirely mine that I can sell. Because everything I use for this course has been shared with so many other amazing educators.
People always ask me for AP Bio stuff. I'm like, I can't do it. All I did was use other people's stuff. So I get that. Okay, that's awesome. We're definitely going to link that. Okay, I don't know if this will apply to your population because it is such a unique population you teach, but just every guest I have on, I like to ask about student apathy because I just think it's truly the pandemic, post-pandemic in our classroom. So do you have any experience with that in your environment, and kind of what do you do for motivating those apathetic students?
Oh, I certainly have apathy. Even with, again, these kids are trying to go to really amazing colleges. 100% of our students go to college when they graduate. So in general, with AP courses, I think it's a lot easier to deal with it because there's a certain level of buy-in. And if there are days when kids are just kind of zoned out, they're checked out, whatever, we'll have I call it my come to Jesus talk. I'm like, guys, listen, you picked this course. Yeah. You chose it. You could have picked forensics. You could have picked oceanography, which I also teach. You could have gotten an easy A where you're doing presentations and you have no homework. But you picked it. You picked this course for a reason. I need you to find that reason, remember it, and hold on to it. Or I'll give them the talk about if you are just showing up to class and half in and half out and not really paying attention, whatever, you're earning a 2 right now. You're earning a 2 on the exam because you're not putting in what you need to be successful. And I tell them we're in here for 42 minutes. I don't have a double lab period with them. We don't have multiple periods in a row. And the same conversation kind of comes up with device use if they're on their phones or if they're using their laptops not in a good way. I teach so many juniors and seniors that I kind of let them police themselves. I walk around the room a lot. So I'm constantly, if I see them, switching tabs, just shut the laptop, you're not using it. But I give them that same speech too of, I'm not on my phone. I'm not checking my email. There's 100 things I could be doing right now, but I'm in it. I'm here for you. I'm doing this with you. Do it with me. And sometimes I'll have them stand up. We'll take a little brain break. We'll walk around. But I think the biggest motivator has been, you chose this course. Act like it. You picked it. You could have had an easy A somewhere else. You picked this course to be challenged. Or maybe you picked it because you love the environment or you hate the environment and you want to learn about how to destroy it. I always joke around with them. Maybe you think climate change isn't real, whatever. So that helps. And then I really try to break up my course. I'm redesigning it for the next couple of years. It's too lecture heavy right now. That's kind of the feedback that I've gotten this year. Again, because I came back from maternity leave, I was on autopilot. Let me just get through the year. I do labs, at least 2 every unit. We're outside. I'm trying to do things. The biggest thing I think that has really helped, and those that teach AP Environmental Science have heard of Mr. Smead's. He's got amazing resources. If you use his slides, he'll do practice FRQs for each topic. Nice. So I really started utilizing that where, every 8 slides, we'll talk about eutrophication. I'll have them turn and talk with their neighbor. And then I use a random name wheel to pick who's going to share. So everybody in the room has to be prepared to answer. I might not pick on them, but they've had a low stakes environment to turn and talk with their neighbor about the answer. So they're ready to give one. And that really, really helps too, where I don't really allow their minds to wander a whole lot. Because again, I'm a very energetic, I'm a loud teacher. I'm in it with them the whole time. So I think it makes it a little bit easier too. Showing
that energy is definitely contagious.
I'm not doing anything else. And relationship building. Again, I work at a small school where I've taught kids maybe in 6th grade, maybe in 8th grade, and I'm teaching them again a 3rd time. I'll joke around, you want me to text your dad? Because I still have his number from when I had a call him that time. It's things like that where I again, working at a small school has that perk of I've got a lot of buy-in because the kids know me. I'm a prom chaperone. I go on the field trips with them. But I run an environmental protection club. I do all these other things where I know them very, very well besides just they're my AP student today. Right. So I think all of that really helps.
Yeah. I think there's a benefit too, honestly, of like not having girls. Cause I found for me, like I couldn't allow cell phones at all because a girl would see one text of one drama point and it would just derail them emotionally. And I'm not trying to be categorizing students. I know it can happen to anyone, but I just saw that the most often, especially my classroom was across from the girls' bathroom. And I cannot tell you how many, all the other teachers on my hall were men. And they'd always come get me and be like, someone's crying in the girls' bathroom. We need you to go talk to them. And so I'd always have to step out and go. And it would always be something they saw on their phone when they peeked at it in class. Yep. And, some Snapchat or something that's just terrible. And so, man, it's hard, but I love that perspective you have. And I love that idea too, of just pointing out, like, I'm not on my phone and I would love to disappear mentally from this situation right now, but I'm here.
The other thing that I do, and again, I have the luxury of my administration is phenomenal. I've got a great administrative team where they give us a lot of leeway and they give us a lot of confidence in what we're doing. They're not peering over our shoulders. They're not checking in constantly.
Awesome.
And we've definitely earned it. But again, our admin is great. So I'll give my kids once a quarter. So we have 4 quarters. I'll give them a mental health day. And we vote as a class. I'm like, guys, we're seeming kind of low energy. Do you guys have a bunch of tests going on? What's happening? Oh, this or that. Do we want a mental health day? Remember, we're only halfway through the quarter. We've got a while to go. You only get one. And then they all kind of turn and talk and they're like, let's save it. We're going to save it. But then we'll do a mental health day where I just put on a YouTube video of like soothing waves and music and they can do other things. And it's hard to do that in an AP course when the timeline and this and that, but it's helped tremendously with the buy-in because I tell them I'm tired too. I don't always want to be doing this, but we have to get to the finish line. I've got to get you there. This is what we need to do. And I'll give them choice. I'll tell them at the beginning of the week, we need to cover these 6 topics. We need to do this lab. My intention was to give you an entire class period to work on this lab. Do you want to do it at home and I'll give you guys the day off? And sometimes they pick that. So I think it's really hard to do that in the beginning of teaching an AP course. It's hard to do it in the first couple of years. now that I've hit year 6, it's way easier because I have the foresight. I know what I need to do to get them to where they need to be. Mm-hmm. And I can kind of move a little bit more relaxed than I have in the past. Your first couple of years of teaching an AP, especially the first year, you're just surviving. You are just getting through it. I think everybody kind of blacks out. You don't remember anything from your first year. If you get them to the finish line with 80% of the content, congratulations. That's a huge win. That's all you can ask for.
I love that. And I think that's such a good idea, like you said, for just like that relational buy-in with students. Something you've said over and over in our conversation is like, we're on the same team. I'm trying to get you to this point. You got to do your part. And I think that's a great way to show like your teamwork. And yeah, it stinks for you because it's one less day to teach them, but then you can use that time too to catch up on some of your grading and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So what advice would you give a teacher? Because this is coming out in the summer. Someone might be just now finding out they're teaching APES for the first time. What would you tell them?
It's such a fun course. It's an absolute blast. I think what's really unique about APES, different than AP Bio or AP Chem or AP Physics, is that we've just got so many different disciplines. There's so many different crossovers. If my strength is I studied environmental science and I'm more of the earth sciencey teacher. So a lot of the information in the course is really my favorite, my bread and butter, my favorite stuff to teach. And if it's not, there's 9 units of really diverse information. If you're a chem person, you've got multiple units that are really going to adhere to you. If you're a bio person, you've got some units in the beginning that you're really going to love. So I think no matter what your background is, if you're feeling overwhelmed or feeling nervous about teaching this course, just know that there's such diversity in what we teach that there's going to be a little bit for whatever. I think one of the biggest things that I needed to tell myself when I first started, looking back now, I wish someone would have told me this my first year. You're not going to get through all the content and it's okay. Not going to. You can't possibly. And you don't even know. You could be halfway through the year and be right on pace and be doing great. And then the trains go off the track. And it's okay. I think the other part, the piece that a lot of new teachers, especially teaching an AP, don't think about is you can put a lot on the students. Yeah. I think we try to shove the information into their brains through whatever means necessary, but putting a little bit more of the emphasis on them outside study if you're trying to move through content and things like that. And then relying on what people have done before you. So I'm sure AP Bio has it too. There's an amazing Facebook group for APES teachers. There's 2 different ones, National APES teachers and then APES Unleashed or Unleashed APES. I forget what it is. And there are so many teachers that will share thousands of free resources with you. There's so many amazing websites. There's so many teachers I could name that are really just there to support it. So when you're starting out, just do what you can. Do what you can. Try to do activities where you can. And don't worry about getting through all the content because your kids will figure it out. Or they won't. And you'll know by year 2 how to do it better.
Right. And you're only...
Give yourself grace.
Yes. So much grace. Because like you said, like you're going to get to these places the more you do it. And it's just going to take some time and that's okay. And yeah, Kali, that was all such good advice. I love everything you said. Okay. So what else? My other question would be then advice specifically for maybe the teacher who's right now finding out they're about to become a parent that during this school year or take a maternity leave or paternity leave at some point during the school year. Kind of what advice would you have for them since you just got out of this season?
Yeah, similar advice. Give yourself grace. Know that I forget who said it. I think it was a speech at someone's graduation years and years and years ago, but it's my favorite example. He talked about how there are 5 balls of life. You've got your work, your family, your health, your spirit, I think, or your religion or whatever it may be. And some of these balls are made of rubber and some of them are made of glass. So your work ball is made of rubber. You can drop it. It'll bounce back up. It'll be fine. Your family, your health, your overall spirit, your mental health and things like that are glass balls. If you drop them, they might not come back up. So knowing that you need to prioritize the things that are important, the things that actually matter at the end of the day, I think is really, really important, especially as a parent. We're so self-sacrificing, especially in the beginning in that first postpartum. I mean, postpartum, I feel like lasts forever at this point. I'm 2 months out of it and I still feel like
You're like, when am I not postpartum? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still in it. But giving yourself grace. And I mean, you're type A like me too. Just kind of letting go. I was checking Schoology and why are the grades like this? And I gave them this. delete it off your phone. Don't look at it. I had a really great mentor that emailed me over the summer. I emailed, okay, here are all my maternity plans. And I think that you should do this. And then all of my instructions. And she wrote back, delete Gmail from your phone. Enjoy that baby.
100%.
She's my boss that is supposed to value productivity and this and that. And she's a mom too. She gets it. So if you're going into this new phase of life, know that teaching will always be there. The students will always be there, and you're replaceable at your job. You really truly are. Even though we feel like we've carved out this niche and the kids love us and this and that, anybody could do it. Maybe not the same way, but anybody could do it. And no one can do what you're doing for your baby.
That's so true.
You have to focus on that.
And it's good for the students to have to learn adaptability.
Oh, for sure.
Like we just think about all they're going to lose. I remember so many of the older women at my job, like leading into my mat leave, were like telling me, trust me, like you'll feel so different once the baby's born. And I'm like, no, I'm still going to be. And they were so right. They're like, they all laughed at me. And I was like, don't laugh at me. But they were right. Like as soon as you meet that person, you're just like, I don't care about anything else. I even had some students that I mentored in a mentorship program we had. So they had my phone number. And so I had deleted the email and all that, but sometimes they would text me some crazy stuff going on in my classroom. And I was like, y'all, you cannot text me anything about work. I was like, I love you. And I know you just think this is a need to know, but it's not anymore. Like, I just don't need to know.
And you don't know until you've gone through it. Because people were saying the same thing to me. And I was like, no, I'm still going to, no. Your entire life
is reoriented.
You have no idea until it happens.
It's so fun. It's so awesome. It's the best reorientation.
Oh, it's the best. It's amazing.
Okay. So the last question I have for you is I ask everybody, because this is the Secondary Science Simplified podcast. What's one way you simplified your life recently?
Man, with a baby, right now it's baby gates. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, seriously. There's people who don't baby proof their house. I'm like, why? Like, why not? It's going to make your life so much easier.
I sent my husband a video this morning. I went to the bathroom. I went to pee for probably 34 seconds. I left him in his room on the floor. And I look up as I'm, coming out of the bathroom, and he's across the hallway, walking right past the stairs that didn't have a gate. And I'm like, no. My hack is meal planning is really, really hard for my husband and I, especially now that we have an 11-month-old that wants to eat everything we're eating. There's an app we use called Cozy, COZI.
Never heard of it.
There's so many apps that do this. I'm sure there's one that does it better than this one. This is just the one I use. You can upload all of your recipes, and then you can click on the recipe you want to make that week. It'll populate it into your calendar, and it'll populate a grocery list for you.
Oh my word.
That has been a game changer in our household. And what's great about it is if my husband's grocery shopping and I'm at home, I can add things and it'll sync with his app in real time. He can check off things on the list, but and it has like I guess you call it like a recipe box or whatever. It'll store all the recipes that we've done, and it'll say, oh, you've made this 7 times last month or whatever. And it'll tell you, do you want to make it again? Populate it into your list. So that's been a hack for good work-life balance and overall
I love that.
Household management.
I just love hearing how people do all of that stuff at home too, because it's hard to figure out all the things. Well, Kimberly, this has been so awesome. I'm thrilled this worked out. I'm so grateful for your time. I'm like, I kind of want to teach apes one day. Like, that sounds so fun. I want to use your case study. So how is the best way for my listeners to find you, find your case studies, all the things?
Yeah. So I don't have a ton of products on Teachers Pay Teachers, but my account name is Tree Hugger Teach. So I have case studies on there, and I have things, I do different labs with my 8th graders on peach and sour candy, Halloween labs. So I have like themed labs and things like that I sell there too. Tree Hugger Teach on TPT. And then my Instagram is, I post some teachery things, is Kimby the Runner. So my name is Kimberly, Kimby the Runner. Mostly post baby stuff, but some teacher stuff too.
Awesome. Okay, well, we're going to link those, and then I'm going to get the links to a couple other things you mentioned too. So those will all be in the show notes for anyone listening. Thank you seriously so much.
Thank you. It's been a blast.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode and my interview with Kimberly. You can find all the links mentioned in the show notes at itsnotrocketscienceclassroom.com/episode 137. And if you are listening to this episode and you're a parent and you have not left a rating and a review for the podcast, it's your turn. Head over to Apple Podcasts, and we'd love it if you left a 5-star rating and a review so that other teachers and parents who are listening or checking out the podcast can know that this is a good fit for them. All right, teacher friends, that wraps up today's episode. If you're looking for an easy way to start simplifying your life as a secondary science teacher, head to itsnotrocketscienceclassroom.com/challenge to grab your classroom reset challenge. And guess what? It's totally free. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you here next week. Until then, I'll be rooting for you, teacher friend.